G'day Bomber fans, how you going? I'm really excited about this one today. We've got a really good guest on the channel. We've got the legendary, big-brained footy guru, Dylan Alexander. He is going to come on the channel. We are going to yap at each other for hours and hours and hours about the Essendon 2025 draft crop, the 5 players that we took in the draft. I figured I got to get Dylan on to chat about these guys because no one knows the draft like Dylan Alexander. He really is just an awesome content creator, awesome bloke. I've got his channels in the description below. Give them a follow if you haven't already. He is just an absolute legend. Let's get into it. G'day, Dylan, mate. How are you going?
Mate, I am awesome. Awesome. It's
Awesome.
January. We're starting to get that. You jump on social media and you
Yep.
just start to get that feed coming in of like the footy energy. It
Mm-hmm.
was cricket for a long time, and I got to be like, I'm a cricket fan. Like I got around the Ashes,
Yeah.
but now we're starting to get proper footy stuff coming through. So I'm excited. Footy shows are coming back. There's more
Yes.
talk around the game. You see clips and all of that kind of stuff. So optimistic for a big
Optimistic.
season ahead. Not necessarily optimistic as a North Melbourne fan, but just optimistic from a football fan perspective.
Well, I was going to talk to you a bit about that because you are a North Melbourne fan, which I don't know, it doesn't really show through in your profile and your presence much, which I guess shows, that there's not much bias there. And it's a big reason why I've got you on the channel because, Essendon fans, I've got a bunch of Essendon fans on the channel to talk about the draft and hype up the young players we've got. I haven't even actually really spoken to a non-Essendon fan yet about the 2026 draft on the 2025 draft on the channel yet. And I thought I'd get a big-brained individual, a draft guru on the channel to talk about Essendon's draft purely as a neutral, especially after training and everything that we've seen vision now of the Bombers at training. I think it's important for fans not only to hear from passionate fans like myself, but from smart footy nerds who just like to talk about footy. And that's what we're going to do today, Dylan. We are going to be yapping about footy, about the Essendon draft in 2025.
Mate, only small brains here. This is a small brain
Small
space.
brain?
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Got you,
Don't go
got
too
you.
big on it.
Alrighty. So before we get into it, just for those who might be unaware with your channel and what we do, I don't know if there would be anyone, watching AFL YouTube videos unaware with the great Dylan Alexander. But give us a quick little rundown of what you do, and more so, I guess, what your, the Dylan Alexander channel, the draft channel, really entails week to week. How much footy are you watching? How much juniors games are you getting out to each week?
Yeah, well, I guess the channel and my whole presence on social media kind of started with the draft heavily. Started with me going around. The first video I ever did, it was like a vlog at a Coates Talent League game. So pretty much going to the games in Victoria, looking at talent. The background to that is that footy's always been a massive part of my life. So it's something that I've never kind of thought that I could work in necessarily, like it's sort of become, but definitely a big part of my life. So I started going to the games as I got an interest in video making and media and stuff like that.
Right.
Started filming and vlogging and talking about the young players because I just didn't see online. I didn't see much of a presence sort of outside the Kaltoomies and the major ones on mainstream media. So I wanted to bring something there, bring something a little different. The first videos that I did weren't particularly successful, kind of going with that vlogging style. So I more
Mhm.
started to come back and I continued to go to games, did less of the vlogging, but still tried to bring that sort of, I guess, like a lens of trying to look at it through a recruiter's eyes
Yeah.
and understand the demands of the modern game and what clubs actually look for in these players. So a lot of draft rankings, a lot of mock drafts and things like that. But it is important, I feel, to get out to the games as well, to be able to properly rank them, see how they interact with their teammates and build the whole picture like a recruiter would to the best of my ability. So that's how it all sort of started. And I'm trying to move that a little bit into more of a broader AFL sort of
Okay.
context as well. I think sometimes you can stretch yourself a little bit too far, but it's important to understand the different clubs, the list builds that they have, the makeup of their squads, and all of that kind of stuff in order to actually read the draft properly. So,
Yeah.
on my channel, long story short, you will find draft content, you'll find general AFL content, but looking at it, I guess, primarily through like a list management and recruiting lens,
Yeah.
predominantly.
And I think that's something you do really well in the space, not to glaze too much, but you do understand what teams need. And I think it's really easy for, draft nerds to just put out their power rankings and just leave it at that. But I think there's, an understanding of what teams want and need in the draft that you have, which makes your content really accessible. I'm going to link Dylan's channels in the description below, so check them out. But yeah, how many games do you think you watch more AFL footy, or do you think you watch more under 18s footy, or at least in 2025? What did you think
More
you digested more?
more under 18 football,
Right.
and particularly live,
Yeah.
because you're going to those games. It's more difficult with under 18 football to watch it back on streams because you get poor quality streams and stuff like that,
Yeah,
where
you really do.
you can always go back on a Monday or a Tuesday and watch some of the AFL games that you miss. You can watch the minis and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a lot easier to kind of retrace your steps a little bit
Yeah.
there. But no, definitely more under 18 football than AFL. But I try to squeeze in as much as humanly possible. And I
Mm.
also do, I mean, I follow a lot of the major media channels. I follow a lot of fan channels that I rate and respect, such as your own, on everything Essendon, to get all my Bomber news as well. So it's kind of important to do that, I think, to stay across the narratives and understand what the fans are thinking as well.
Yeah, good shout. So Talent League, Champs Footy, you go to your APS games as well. Is that roughly it? Do you go to any club footy as well, or is it just those three
No,
mainly?
it is pretty much just those
Yeah.
three. I mean, the big one is the champs.
Yeah.
When you're talking under 18 football, like that's the one that the recruiters are really, really sold on. I think the talent league's definitely important and it plays a big part in like the overall draft picture. But there is a bit of a, and I don't know if the AFL are looking at this and they want to do something about this, but it's like the games in Coates Talent League, they feel a bit dead rubber. So it's like the performances matter, and watching the player, how they play, how they interact matters. But you might actually get a little bit more, even though the standard is worse at, say, an APS game, a school footy game, the games are a little bit more important and a little bit more meaningful
Yeah.
when you're
Yeah.
watching it at that level. Like it's all kind of, it's like a round robin season in the APS system. So every game ultimately matters. And I think that's important too to consider when you're watching it all. And that's something, all of that space is probably the biggest learning curve for me because originally I'm from Tasmania. I wasn't sort of
Mm.
aware of the culture that existed in Victorian football. So learning all that's been a big one and kind of helps you to understand how players actually go about transitioning into the AFL as well.
Yeah, and I think you're right in that APS footy is, I mean, it's slept on 100%, but you look at the vibes. I've only been to a couple of games in SA, and it's probably even better in Victoria, with the schools you have there. But you probably get more fans at those games and more dedicated fans than in Champs or Talent League. You've got all the school kids on the hill, like cheering and everything. The vibes are immaculate. Whereas you go to a Talent League game, you've got a few cars on the hill beeping after every goal, and you're right. And even just the coverage of not only of Talent League, but I think you and I both noticed this year the Champs footy coverage was probably at an all-time low that I've seen recently. We were doing a live stream and had to start like halfway through a game because they hadn't got the stream up and running yet. So it is definitely a space where the AFL are probably needing to up their game a bit. I'd say in 2026.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you kind of sometimes it's puzzling to understand what their motivations are there. I mean,
Yeah,
to me, it's sort of one of those things where they kind of understand that they obviously pump money into the talent pathway programs because they have to. They need a pathway for players to come into the AFL, but they've got it there. They don't really care too much about making it a bigger thing. But I think fans are starting to, and I guess content creators as well, are sort of starting to want to make it bigger themselves.
yeah,
And in a way, like the AFL needs to catch up. But you're right. Like I remember we did that stream with, I think it was SA and Victoria, and like the
yeah. It was.
commentators that they get don't know the players, and the stream starts late, and we thought it was on our end, and it's actually the
Yeah,
stream just didn't start and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's definitely a lack of quality and investment in the overall product for sure. But yeah, APS is like its own independent thing, and that's what's great about it. And while nobody really honestly gives a shit about like Vic Country versus Vic Metro, like it's not a
mm,
huge rivalry to any person. And, the Gippsland Power versus the Oakley Chargers, there's not a real rivalry there, but there is between, St. Kevin's and Xavier College in the APS, and the kids get around it.
yeah.
They support them really, really hard. So there's an atmosphere, and the players rise to that atmosphere like they do in AFL footy as well. So it's an interesting space.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think that's something that we're probably going to talk about more on all my channels really in 2026 is APS footy and just what part it plays, because there is a player I'm going to talk about in a bit here who I'm keen to hear your thoughts on, because I've heard most of his best work came in APS footy, but we'll get to that later. We're going to go in order of draft today. We're going to be talking about Essendon's 5 draftees that we took in 2025. Going to be highlighting them, talking about them, getting your opinion on them, because I think, as I said, it's important to get a footy neutral talking about, club drafted players. We're going to start today with, of course, Mr. Sullivan Robey, pick 9, 192 centimeters, one of the biggest bolters in draft history. Came from absolutely nowhere to find himself in the top 10 in a draft. It was a crazy, crazy story. There'd be many out there who, not only haven't seen Sullivan Robey play footy, but also haven't seen him train because of that hot spot in his back, which he's only just starting to progress from now and get back into running. How would you describe Sullivan Robey to someone who hasn't seen him play yet?
If you wanted just a direct player comparison, just to
Okay,
start
hit
visualizing
me.
Sullivan Robey, I would say think LDU,
Okay.
think Jordan De Goey,
Yeah.
that type of player, someone that can go forward, hit the scoreboard, can be a big, powerful presence from like a forward stoppage, take a mark inside 50 as well, but also come into the midfield. And I think that will be the transition for Sullivan Robey over time. I think he will, when he first starts playing for Essendon, it will be as that kind of half forward, bit of a conduit between the midfield and forward line. But he's a big, powerful guy. He's got not elite speed, but he's got really good speed to be able to burst through. He's a tackle breaker. He's got good reach in at the centre stoppages. And I think if you look at Essendon's overall midfield mix, like they have lacked that big bodied, powerful midfielder, right? The guy
Yeah.
that's kind of forward mid. They've sort of invented it through Durham, who they took in the mid-season draft, but just to have another one of those at a really high quality, you get that in Sullivan Robey. And most people do know about the whole, like the narrative with him about the growth spurt where I think he grew like 20 centimeters in like 18 months or something
Mm.
like that, which is crazy. But I think the important part of that is what type of a player that has kind of turned him into, because he was more of a ground level, smaller forward type player. And that growth spurt, you continue to have those ground level skills that you developed as a teenager, but then you become this physical presence and you can add different levers to your games. Patrick Cripps did that and he was another player in his draft year that had a big growth spurt.
Yeah.
And then when they put all of that together, which can take a little bit of time, they become this absolute animal. And I think that's what you saw from Sullivan Robey at the back end of the season. He was just really dominating Coates Talent League football. There's always that, I suppose, like devil's advocate around a player like that they haven't done it for long enough and all of
Yeah.
those sorts of things. But he's playing the top level football for his age group and he's able to dominate at that level. So I think we saw enough from him at the back end of the season. His grand final performance was huge. I think he kicked 4 goals in that. And there's a mentality to him as well. Some of those goals that he did kick, they were big ones for the Eastern Rangers, who were trying to overcome the Sandringham Dragons, who have been a powerhouse in that competition for a long time.
Yeah.
And he opted to do it. He was one of the main reasons that they did it. So I think he's going to be great. Obviously, there's a bit of, when I talk about that growth spurt and everything like that, and I know I'm kind of waffling on here, but the fact that he had the hot spot, it was a little bit of a concern, just in
Mm.
the sense that he has put on a lot of size and his
Yeah.
body's changed a lot in the last 18 months. And in a way, it almost felt a little bit expected. Like, yeah, okay, that makes sense that he's actually pulled that sort of an injury, because it's one of those, like, it's stress on the body.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's almost trained too hard.
It would have been a surprise if he didn't come out of that growth spurt with something. I'm not like, making the best of a bad situation or anything, but also for those, unaware, clubs actually aren't really allowed to do testing on these young players before draft night, medical testing. So he turned up to the club day one and the hotspot was there. I think it was obviously unfortunate, but, not unexpected, I guess, with a player, growing that much, doing that much work on their body in the last few years. I want to talk to you a little bit because I texted you about, and I'm not trying to throw you on the bus here or anything, but I texted you a few weeks into Sullivan Robey's emergence. I think it might have been after one of his big games, game 3 or 4. I think I just said, "What are your thoughts on Sullivan Robey?" And it seemed like you weren't quite sure on him just yet. I don't know if I'm correct in saying this, but did it take you a little bit longer to come around to the idea of Sullivan Robey? Because by the end of the year, you were pretty hyped on him, as was everyone else, that followed the draft. What brought you around in the end?
There is, just for a little bit of context on that. I remember he'd played, it was one of his earlier like really really big games,
Yeah.
and I missed it. I
Okay, right.
So there was a time where I was actually still just trying to play catch up
Yeah.
with watching the game, but I'd seen, if there was one knock on Sullivan Roby, and it was something that I had to weigh up with the strengths and the weaknesses of him as a player overall, but his kicking, like short passing option, that sort of lower your eyes kick when you come out of stoppage. I think he still needs to work on that a little bit. And he's not the most precise kick. You look at the guys at Essendon drafted here, like Jacob Farrow, he's got that really, really precise ball use where he can really split you open, and he's got crossbody kicks and stuff like that. I don't think Sullivan Roby quite has that polish to him. So he brings more of a physical presence and a power presence, all of that, those sort of attributes, and not necessarily the kicking. So to put him up, let's put the number one player in the 2024 draft, which was an absolute super draft. I would say Sam Lawler has those powerful traits that Sullivan Roby has, but he also has amazing technical skills. Like he can kick on both sides of the body. He's so smooth. I'd say Sullivan Roby doesn't quite have that level of something like a Sam Lawler as an entire package. So there were things with that where I just wanted to see a few more games and see him playing at the top level. But by the time he played in that, I think there was a prelim against the Kondogiannis where he absolutely
Yeah.
dominated, and
Yeah.
then the grand final where it was like a big game performance. And I'm like, well, this guy, I've seen enough now
Yeah.
for what he can do overall.
Cracked collarbone in that grand final as well. So
Crack.
I'm really glad you brought up the kicking, because this is something I've been thinking about, right? So I was at the club, I was at Essendon, and someone in their list management space was talking to me about the draft and said that he believes we took three of the five best kicks in the draft, which I personally think speaks more to the quality of ball use in the draft, which is something I spoke about a lot on the channel last year, which is why I was really big on guys like Josh Lindsay and their ball use out of the back half, because there really weren't much good kicks in the draft. But I was trying to think of who these kicks would be. Obviously Jacob Farrow is one. I'd say Max Kondogiannis, who we're going to talk about later, is the other. The only other player that I could assume was the kick he was talking about was Sullivan Roby. And I don't know if he means field kicking, because I do agree. I don't think he's an excellent field kick. I think he's solid and good, and has power in his legs, that creates distance. And he is good in front of goal. I think he kicked 18 goals, and two or three behinds for the Eastern Rangers. But I wouldn't have thought clubs would be rating him as a top five kick in the draft.
No, I wouldn't either. But I think that maybe that is that conversation that you're having there, which is kicking is not, there's not just one type of kick.
Yeah.
We sometimes make that unilateral thing.
Yeah.
But Sullivan Roby, he is like, when you put him inside 50, he's lethal.
Yeah.
He can kick goals. But it's more of that kick where it's more of that controlled kick, right? The short kicking around the field. Can he turn onto different sides of his body, hit targets around the corner, all of those sorts of stuff? And there's a lot of things that come into that too. There's like decision making, and then there's the technical skills and kind of weighing up which one. That's interesting. I would agree that, I mean, Jacob Farrow, certainly
Yeah.
one of the top kicks. And you're right in saying that that draft crop overall isn't particularly strong. Like you even
No.
go to those top players in the crop, Willem Dersma's not, I think, like a top level kick. Zeke Hewlin probably is. Like I'd have
Yeah,
him
he'd probably be up there.
in that conversation. Patterson's a decent kick as well, but Farrow definitely stood out, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's definitely a part of it, that a way that you guys want to play, to have those good kicks in the competition. And yeah, it's hard to rank that though, to put that
No.
now and later on in the draft. I'm trying to think of the names who that I would have ahead, but I wouldn't have Sullivan Roby for me in like the top five kicks in the draft.
I agree. That's what I found really interesting. And maybe I think the club's plan is probably to have him in the midfield. But I remember I was speaking to his Roeville Hawks coach, who I asked him what his best position is, and he said key forward, which, if you think about a key forward, you think their kicking is primarily, you want them to be good in front of the goals, which he is. And of course, he's got more of a growth coming. He's actually got X-ray showed he's got more growth to come, which is, I mean, once you get to like 194, 195, you're looking at that size for a key forward. So maybe that's what the club was thinking. But yeah, field kicking, it wasn't Sullivan Robey who they confirmed to be that player. I'm just kind of putting the pieces together because I don't think it'd be Dyson Sharp. I don't think it'd be Huss either as that top five. So that was something that surprised me. Now, I'm going to be asking you with all these players this question. If you would have gone with another choice with pick nine, I think it's probably a silly question for Sullivan Robey. So I'll ask you something different instead because it was a bit of a surprise that we even got him on our books anyway. Let's say we've got the one pick, or let's say we've got Richmond's picks. What were they? Five or six or seven? Is it if you had to choose Grill, Cumming, or Robey? Who stands out the most out of those three?
Oh, I was actually when you said what we're going to be talking about today, I didn't know the question was going to come like this. I
Right.
was I was working that out. So Grill, Cumming, Roby. You know what? In retrospect, I reckon the player, and you know what I reckon about this draft. I think every club had a different strategy coming into the draft. So it
Yeah,
doesn't, I don't think it has to be this question of like, who was the best of those? You
I
pick
agree.
best
Yeah.
available talent. I don't think Sam Grill particularly was the most suited player to Essendon. So I think he, out of those three players, he would be the back marker there.
But you were
I
really
don't
big
think,
on Sam Grill, right?
I loved him. I
Yeah.
rated him higher than anybody else. And I
Yeah.
think he was the perfect pick to go to Richmond
Yeah.
because of how their list build is and the experience that they have there, and they don't really need to build out from their midfield like an Essendon does. So
Yeah.
I found for me, like Dyson Sharp was a really important player for Essendon to get in the door because they lack leadership. So, and you can see that with all of the things that happen with, the Zach Merritt situation, new captain there in Andy McGrath, but also like Fiorini, I think, is now in the leadership group as
Yeah.
well. So there's a clear lack of leadership there
Yeah.
overall. So bringing in a player like that. To go back to your question, Sam Cumming versus Sam Roby, I think in the end, with all things considered, during the season, I had a bit of bad intel, and I think we talked about this on Sam Cumming, and there was a something where I was talking to recruiters about, and there was a bit of like shade thrown. I'd probably go Sam Cumming. I think if I was to rank that, I'd probably still say that he is the higher talent overall with the entire skill set, but it'd be close between him and Roby. I think
Yeah.
that's a genuine 50-50. And I think Essendon overall, with the picks that they made, like I said, they did what was best for them. And
Yeah.
obviously, I mean, they didn't have the option anyway to pick Sam Cumming. So it's a hypothetical, right?
Yeah. And I think I don't know if you're correct, but I do know that the club was really big on Sam Cumming, as all 18 clubs probably were. This was a guy that was probably like right up the top, I reckon, of Essendon's calculations. And in an ideal world, there might have been a draft where Sam Cumming is with Essendon, but of course, we had selections after, and no complaints with Sullivan Robey, who, Essendon fan growing up as well, just a high upside player who we took along other players that fit needs. Speaking of other players that fits needs, Jacob Farrow, pick 10, right after Sullivan Robey, drafted from WA, defender, midfielder, wingman. Were you surprised on draft night that the Bombers went this early with Jacob Farrow?
Not really.
No?
Not really. There was, I think, like sometimes the Western Australian players get lost a little bit
Yeah.
because it's hard for people to, and this is a difficulty with judging the draft. The Coates Talent League is sort of seen as that benchmark. And then
Yeah.
it's a little bit more difficult to judge, say, the under 18 competitions in different states, just because they do drop off a little bit. And then some of the guys play senior football, and it's then like, how much stock do you put in that? So it can be a little bit complicated. But Jacob Farrow has a pretty wide skill set. I think for like a modern day midfielder, he's a guy that comes in there straight away and has a lot of size and reach and physicality in and around the ball. If you want him to be that midfielder, he does have that ability to be able to come out of stoppage and kick the ball really well and change angles. So immediately he gets the ball at stoppage right. He gets met by a bunch of players coming onto him, and he can change angles better than a lot of those other players when he
Yeah.
comes out. So he can make the field bigger, and he can, throw defensive shapes off a lot more. I think his defensive application is really good, and you can see that he reads the game so well. Most of his football at the Champs was played across half back, where he's reading and he's intercepting and he's coming off. And I like those halfback players that come into the midfield because they usually get a really good education, sort of understanding defensive shape, and they see the game really well ahead of them. So I think he's going to do well at that. I think I'd expect for Essendon this season, he's going to be a guy that probably starts at halfback and then steps into the midfield as he goes along. But to answer your question on whether I think it was a surprise, not really. And again, it comes back to that conversation of Essendon of like, what did they need? What did they need to do with these three top picks that they were given at the top end of the draft? And I think Farrow fit it perfectly. I don't think it was necessary for them to go, oh, we need speed, we need Sam Grill, we need that energy, we need Lockie Doverston in the forward half of the ground. They didn't really have to do that and speculate on those players. So it worked perfectly for them. And if it wasn't them, it would have been Melbourne with the next two picks for sure.
And I think that's the strategy. I think I reckon Essendon probably, if we had back-to-back-to-back selections, probably would have gone Dyson Sharp earlier. I think he was a player that the Bombers really liked, but it's that knowing that, Melbourne probably would pass on a Dyson Sharp, a player that they don't need. But if, we took Dyson Sharp with pick 10, Jacob Farrow probably would have been eaten up by the Ds. So I think it was getting those three players across, and Farrow, coming this early was the reason we were able to get Dyson Sharp later as well.
Exactly. It's like, it's a game within a game, right?
Yeah.
And Dyson Sharp, I rated him. He changed for me a lot across the season, the way that I perceived him with his performances and his leadership for sure. But he does it like he's got deficiencies 100%.
Yeah.
Like you're not getting, I think Farrow and Robey, you are getting that upside and a real game shaper and game changer. But Dyson Sharp, the way that the game's going, how much outside football and speed and run are really valued in the game at the moment. I think Dyson Sharp does have some limitations, but I just think Essendon needed that type of player. And for them in the situation that they were in, what would have been really interesting, I think, is if Essendon didn't pick Dyson Sharp there, at what point would he have gone? I think that's the really interesting one. I know Adelaide were pretty keen and would have traded up, but what was their pick was about 18 on the night, I think. It's hard to remember back to everything, but yeah, like, would he have actually slipped outside the top 20 in the end? I reckon he would have been maybe around that 20 mark, which is interesting. And it shows how much it's club specific of your needs as well.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I've just had a thought, and I wish I'd thought about this earlier because I'm not 100% sure if I'm correct. So correct me if I'm wrong, but did you speak to Jacob Farrow on draft night on the Daniel Goran stream, or am I thinking?
Oh, yeah, we did actually.
It was Jacob Farrow?
I actually forgot about that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, what were your perceptions? What was he like?
I mean, all of the players that we spoke to on draft night were very overwhelmed.
Yeah, fair enough.
I would say they were very excitable. But all of the stuff that I've heard about Jacob Farrow and the way that he speaks and stuff, he's very well put together. He's like a leader at West Perth, and he spoke really well. He actually he came on the DDF episode because he was pick 10 in the end, which is the player that DDF sponsor, because that's the pick that Dan Gorringe was.
Oh, right. Okay.
So he was like the DDF player.
Okay. Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, no, great kid, speaks really well, and I think Essendon really went after those kind of players that they think can be leaders for them in the midfield, because I think it's something that they've historically not valued as highly as other clubs, and I think that's probably hurt them overall. They've sort of had this mismatch. We've talked about it a lot, mismatch of sort of football types, and some are non-athletes and too footballer, and some are too athletic and not footballer enough, and they're sort of they're like, what do we need? What do Essendon need as a football club? And I think they're going after that now.
Yeah. Now, there was a really fun little snippet in an Essendon content. It was some footage of Matt Rosa kind of talking about the three players. He said, "Oh, we've got the defender in Farrow, the midfielder in Sharp, and I think he might have said the forward midfielder in Robey." And then Brad Scott kind of like shot him a look and said, "Well, three midfielders."
Yeah.
So you're backing in Farrow to play midfield in the future. He has been, by the way, I don't know if you've seen, but he's been training recently in match sim in the midfield, in the kind of the B team midfield alongside Sardis and Sharp. So are you backing him in as a full-time midfielder, you reckon, in the future?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think really what you've drafted is you've drafted one probably non-versatile mid in Dyson Sharp.
Yep.
And then you've drafted two very versatile players that could play across any line. So definitely the plan for the club would be, though, that all of these guys in an ideal world turn into midfielders. Yeah. For sure. I think if you're playing long term, if you're just playing Robey as that forward, I think you probably want, as a genuine small forward, you want a player that is a little bit quicker, has faster feet. Roby's got the goal threat for sure, but you look at the prototypes of who's doing that role really, really well, and it's like Cozzy Pickett and he pinch hits in the midfield. Roby's a little bit different to that. He's more like that, like I said, that LDU, Jordan De Goey type, and I think they're suited to being around the ball at the moment more. Farrow opens up different doors because of his kicking, so he can kind of come in and play that. You could even play him across the wing. Like,
Yeah, I've been
honest.
thinking that. Yeah.
Yeah, a bit of an outlet marking winger, and
Yep.
you want to be able to be set up to have really, really high quality inside 50 entries as well. So if you can get those guys receiving the ball in space around the 50 arc like a Farrow, he can do that. But undoubtedly, I reckon that conversation is really, really funny actually about like the recruiter versus the coach looking at that
Yeah.
situation. But
Yeah.
yeah, three
Yeah.
mids on
Three
Brad's
mids.
spot.
And you wouldn't have taken anyone above him, not Xavier Taylor or Doveston or anyone.
When you asked me if I was surprised that they took Farrow, like that would have been the only, like Xavier Taylor would have been the only one that I was thinking of that
Yeah.
you could have gone for, and you could certainly justify that. Like if Essendon had a called Xavier Taylor, I don't think we're going, oh, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But when you actually look at what Essendon have at the moment, they've drafted Angus Clark, who looks really high quality. Kondogiannis is someone they got later. They didn't have him at the time, clearly.
Yeah.
But you've also got you've got Jordan Ridley there. You've got Mason Redman. You sort of got a lot of these
Yeah.
hybrid type
Fair enough.
defenders as it is. So I think like Jacob Farrow's closer to that midfield utility than someone like a Xavier Taylor.
Yeah.
I think he could go higher up the ground, Taylor, at certain points in his career. But I think Essendon have done the right thing for them.
Yeah. Fair enough. Moving on to Dyson Sharp. This is a player I think you and I spoke a lot about on the channel, and I think
Everyone did.
yeah, I mean, yeah, he was a really interesting draft prospect because he just dominated for years. But no one could really find a common ground with Dyson Sharp. Even now, I don't think there's much common ground with Dyson Sharp. Pick 13, Central Districts. One of the best draft CVs you'll ever see. I remember, early in the year, neither of us were too hyped on Sharp as a draft prospect. As the year went on, I think everyone started to move him up boards a little bit. I think I kind of stayed around. I mean, I probably see his draft value as fair to not high, but in that fair range. I think, but that doesn't take away from the Bombers drafting him. I think this is a pretty clearly a culture pick, as you mentioned before, and it's also someone who really complements the high upside players we've got. Do you think this guy is just a pure midfielder his whole career? Do you think there's any versatility to his game?
No, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
It's a guy, it's a high floor player, someone
Yeah.
that just consistently plays well and brings others along with him. He's a connector, he's a culture piece. I caught a little bit of a snippet. Someone posted something of an Essendon training, and I absolutely loved it. It was like Sardis won a clearance and got it out to Sharp, and he sort of shrugged off a tackle, and he came out the side of the stoppage, and he kicked this like can only be described as the biggest mongrel kick I've ever seen. Like the ball was just like going all over the place. It's in a washing machine, but it hit the target perfectly.
Yeah, I know.
just
I
thought
know
that-
the footage you're talking about. Actually, yeah,
Yeah, like it just perfectly encapsulates Dyson Sharp. It's
Yeah.
like efficient, very efficient with the way that he goes about it, and it seems to work out, but it doesn't look necessarily that aesthetic, right? So you're looking at that Farrow combination of Sharp versus Farrow, and Farrow does everything so smooth and so nice, and Sharp looks a bit more rugged and brash. But at the end of the day, sometimes when it comes to sport, like you just got to have the guy that's got a bit of dog in him.
yeah,
And Dyson Sharp absolutely has that. Like, yes, he's going to be decisive and people are going to talk about does he suit the modern game and all of that kind of stuff. But every level he's gone to, you have this evidence that he just adapts
yeah,
to the next situation that he gets to. And I have no doubt that he's going to adapt to AFL level. And when you ask me about does he have any versatility in him, one of the interesting things about his season was he was playing for Central Districts in the seniors as a high forward and doing that role pretty well. Whether he's suited enough at the AFL level to be able to play that role, because I think you need a little bit more speed and a little bit more creativity with the ball to play that role at the top level. But he just keeps doing it. So at what point do you just go, like, you just take your hat off and just say, this guy's a good player? It's sometimes, and I was stuck in that mold a little bit at the beginning of the year where I'd sort of gone, he's not my type. And I'd put him aside and said, I'm not really big on him. but he just kept proving me wrong. And it just makes me look stupid if I continue to say he's not going to be a top player.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I think if Essendon had the one selection, just pick 13 on its own. I don't know if it would be Dyson Sharp, but yeah, alongside what we got, I think it just makes so much sense. Can you see this guy though fitting into a midfield in round one alongside, Parrish, Durham, Caldwell, these inside midfielders that are kind of not like for like, but similar to Dyson Sharp in a lot of ways. If not, who makes way for him?
I think you can have two of those guys
Mm.
that you mentioned. I think Durham's a bit different. Like he's an
Yeah,
inside mid, but he's
yeah,
he's got pace.
and he can
Uh,
play outside too, I guess.
he can play more
Yep.
outside, so I wouldn't put him in that same bucket. But I wouldn't want to send a bounce right with Dyson Sharp, Darcy Parish, and Jai Caldwell.
Yeah.
That's not overly entertaining, is it? Like to think about that. Like it doesn't really get you excited, that midfield. So it will be about balance, but I think that's where in time the Robies and the Jacob Farrows come along and give you some more energy in there.
Yeah.
Over
Yeah.
time, I think the Bombers will be looking to get a little bit more pace into the lineup as well, but you are where you are. And at least with the midfield that you've got and having a player like Dyson Sharp, you get that sort of like immediate hit of them being successful at the beginning. And then you can kind of grow the team around that. So you're sort of building out from the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, in terms of players that you draft ahead of Dyson Sharp, now personally, I had more players, in my personal rankings ahead of Sharp on my board. I think at pick 13 with what was available, he was probably the perfect choice for what I've spoken about before. Was there anyone you would have drafted, or is it just simply Dyson Sharp?
Anyone that went after him, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Ooh, so what are we at there? We're
I don't
talking
even remember, to be honest. Oscar
Dobson,
Taylor,
Oscar Taylor.
yeah, Harley
Like,
Barker.
I mean, I love Tarly Barker,
I
man.
love Harley
Maybe
Barker. Yeah.
maybe not quite as much as you, but I did love him. Um, Again, though, it's like, should Essendon, like if Essendon drafted, let's say Essendon had one pick and they had pick 12 or 13 or whatever
Yeah.
Dyson Sharp was in the end, like they're not going to draft Harley Barker
Mm,
with that one pick, right? Like you
yeah,
can't
no.
really, for a rebuilding team that needs a presence in the midfield and needs leadership, like he's going to come in and he's not going to have anyone to learn off. It's going to take him a long time to get a position. And that's why, like a Geelong end up
It's
drafting him. It's
perfect
like
team.
a
Yeah,
perfect
yeah,
situation. So it is club specific. And I think that it's almost irrelevant. Like, would I have picked a player over Dyson Sharp? Honestly, I don't think you could justify too many other players. Like I liked
I agree.
Matisse Philippou, who went really late in the draft. I think he's got a lot of upside. Like, could he be a better player than Dyson Sharp? Maybe, but we don't have the evidence for
Yeah,
sure. Like he didn't have as consistent a season. He goes to a club like Sydney, who have traditionally developed players so well. So that's probably the best place that he could have gone to become the player that he could be. But if he goes to North Melbourne or he goes to the Bombers, like or West Coast, like do we have that guarantee that that's going to happen? No, you never have a guarantee with anyone, but like it's way less likely. So you've got to pick what works for you as a club.
yeah, agreed. Now, this next guy I'm really excited to talk about, because I think you would have watched him play probably a lot more footy than most. And we were sitting side by side as his name was read out. In fact, I'd say Max Kondogiannis, of all the players that were drafted, I was probably at the time the most excited to hear his name read out, which is really weird for someone drafted at pick 36. But it was just it was a bit of a, not a shock, but it was just a nice surprise because, we weren't linked with him really. We weren't even thinking about him before draft night with all the, both NGA boys linked to the club. We didn't, think about another player being added to the club after those first three. But Max Kondogiannis, pick 36, intercepting defender, wingman, 190 centimeters. Tell me about Max Kondogiannis because you watched a lot of his, or a bit of his APS footy.
Yeah, I saw him early in the APS season playing for Carey, and he captains that side. And I got to the first game, and I was just getting a feel for who everybody was, and I just kept seeing this guy like take intercept after intercept in the back for Carey, and then he was getting on his bike and just gazelling it down the wing at the same time. So he was getting really high and just outrunning guys. So he just stood out so much on the field. And he had so much quality on the ball. He was kicking the ball really, really well inside 50. He was directing traffic. So a complete and utter leader back there for Carey Grammer. And I reckon I watched the first 5 games that they played in the season, getting out to those games. It was just consistent. It was just the same every single time, where he just kept turning up. And he was he just, in a play, you go to a footy game and the player just stands out so much at the level that you can't not take notice. He was that for me. And he's got that look to him where you see a lot of inside mids and they're dominating, but you go, oh, this guy, he's 180 centimeters. Like, what's his point of difference? Kondogiannis has a point of difference with the athleticism that he has and the running ability that he has, and also the ball use as well. So I think to get him at pick 36 in this draft was a massive get for the Bombers. And like, we talk about the mids that they were able to draft at the top end, but like, what a piece there that you didn't probably have to go after, say, the Xavier Taylor. You got Kondogiannis, who was the next best option, but a really, really good option, particularly at pick 36. So I'd say the only, knock when you see him, when he went up to national champs at that level, like, he probably didn't stand out quite as much as some of the others. But then I do think that that's a little bit of the Vic Metro tax in 2025, because none of their players really had. Could you name one player from Vic Metro that had a really, really good champs? Yeah. Maybe an Ollie Greaves. That's about it, really. So nobody really stood out from that team. And he kind of matched it with with the Xavier Taylor, right? As that sort of medium hybrid intercepting defender. So he's an awesome one. He was a bit of definitely an under the radar player throughout the season, and not a lot of people knew about him, I feel. So Essendon got a good one there.
It is really interesting, because I thought he, or in the games that I remember clearly, and I was always much bigger on Xavier Taylor, and I think he was the better draft prospect. At champs, I do remember him playing better footy than Xavier Taylor, and I don't know if that was, me coming into it thinking, oh, who's this guy kind of, taking over from this other guy, but I think even Taylor was a bit of a bolter at the time anyway then. But then, you don't really see his name get brought up too much. He wasn't, a huge performer for the Oakley Chargers either. Do you think there was a reason why, many weren't coming around to the idea of Kondogiannis, and why he went so late, even though, and I guess it might be different because I rated him, a fair bit higher than pick 36, but is there a reason why he wasn't, higher up draft boards? Is it just that lack of, I guess, honestly, dominance across the high levels, or?
There is just some inconsistencies as well across the media coverage of the draft, because I talk to recruiters occasionally, and he was someone that was consistently coming up with them to watch out for in the performances. And I think maybe that is just that he did play his best football at the APS level, which not a lot of media gets to, whether that's like mainstream media or it's fan media, social media, whatever. So I think it's a little bit of that. And like you said, I think if you have, say you play a national champs game and you have a really, really, really big one, then it's going to be talked about and you're going to get put straight up there. But he just didn't really have that elite performance at that level and a lot of the Vic Metro players didn't. So they didn't get put up there, and he didn't have that rep coming in like a Dersma or a Cooper Duff Titler. So he's someone that had to grow into the season. He did it. Maybe he just did it in the wrong competition that doesn't have the limelight on it. And I think that's really what we're talking about there.
Yeah, right. Okay. Now, do you see him as more of a defender or a wingman in the future? I know he's played a few different positions throughout the year, kind of off Broadway. To answer my own question there, I like this guy on the wing, and I think he could be a wingman. But are you more set on him being that defender?
Not necessarily. No, I think it kind of depends how the club wants to kind of set up their ball movement and stuff like that. I see him as a guy that is more of an offensive threat than anything else. Like, he's a bit of a similar in 2024. Like, he's a bit of a Toby Travalia type, where they kind of look like track athletes, right? They're a bit skinnier, a bit leaner. They don't look particularly suited to the contest, but some of those guys that have that, like, they have that weird skinny limmy strength. I think Kondogiannis does have that, but of course it's going to take him some time to get the kind of he's going to have to bulk up a little bit, right, to play on some of those forwards and small forwards. I think he's versatile enough that he can play as a defender, and he can be someone that can watch. And it's going to be matchup dependent, where like sometimes he can play on a smaller forward, medium forwards, and he can also play on those talls. But I think he's a with the ball player for
Yeah,
me.
I agree.
Yeah. So whether it's honestly, whether it's strictly a half back role or it's a wing role, he's versatile enough to play either of those equally as good, I think.
It's kind of Josh Weddle vibes, I think.
It
Not
it is.
comparing the quality, but I think when I'm thinking of what he could be in the future, it's that style of player, the Josh Weddle who might not even have just a lockdown position. Maybe he can even play midfield, or up
And
forward.
Hawthorn are really good with that, with not having
Yeah,
like strict positions as well. They just have like they swing it all the time. Like one guy's pushing forward while the other guy sits back. And I think it's going to be like that. It's a bit of yin and yang.
yeah. I'd be careful with the Hawthorn glaze on the channel though, Dylan. That's strike one.
Yeah, sorry.
Now on to pick 53, Hussien El Achkar. Another one who we've watched a bit of footy of, together. We watched him play a couple of champs games, I think, potentially. One of them was a really enjoyable one where I think he kicked 4 goals and Swade kicked 3, or the other way around, and I was just absolutely loving life at the time. At that time, I think we were talking about him in that 20 to 30 range of the draft, and we were probably struggling a little bit to split Swade and Huss, and I think for most of the year I was kind of under the impression that these guys would go pretty close together in the draft. Obviously, it's a needs-based thing, but tell us a bit about Huss, and why do you think he slid so far down in the end?
Yeah, I don't know if I would call Huss a slide. I suppose when you look at his performances, like you said, probably at the champs, he was Vic Metro's number one small forward, right? Like as far as output. And across the season, he was pretty good. Probably like a player like Huss, I think it's recruiters can probably get a little bit too fixated on what he can't do. And you think about what small forwards are asked to do in the modern game. It's a lot of transitional running. It's a lot of like getting out of the space, leaving it on transition counter attacks, like creating as much space as possible and doing that through running. And I think Hussein's probably not the strongest runner. And when you compare him to, say, you look at a Doveston or you look at a Swade, they are able to get higher up the ground. They're able to get more disposals, get into the game from that sense, but also leave that space and create the space where Hussein's more of that deeper guy.
Yeah.
So there's a pigeonholing there, and there's probably a lack of versatility to that player. Like really, you only carry probably one of those guys in your team
Yeah.
at any time. So I think that's why he slid. I think that was kind of a natural thing in the end. I think the conversation there around Swade and Hussien El Achkar, I might actually throw this one back to you. Were you surprised? Because I'm still a little bit surprised that Essendon didn't go for an Adam Swade. Were you surprised with that?
I guess it's more a conversation of, do you prioritize the early stages of the draft or the later stages? And the only like we would have gone into to deficit if we matched with what we had, which would affect our earliest pick in 2026. But then, could you draft, later picks in 2026 through, which is looking like a better draft? I think like if you look at it as, would you rather a Dyson Sharp or an Adam Swade? You'd lean towards Dyson Sharp pretty heavily. Um, I mean, I'm not surprised. I think it was just unfortunate that, it turned out that way because we had a really good draft hand, but part of that really good draft hand we had was, because we sacrificed, Adam Swade, I guess. Yeah. So
Mm.
that's the unfortunate nature of the draft landscape and how it's changing is because, if that had happened a year prior, Adam Swade's probably on our list because the draft rules and bidding system is a lot easier to navigate and find little loopholes in. But, I think we're going to see a lot more like that going forward. Players left on the outer a bit because clubs just can't justify spending too much on them in terms of draft picks. So, nah, I don't think I'm surprised. I'm disappointed because I really like Adam Swade and really liked what he did last year, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah. I think flipping it back to Hussein, it's more, I guess the question with him for Essendon, it would have been the question for other clubs as well who wanted to make bids. It's like, where does he fit? And like in Essendon's situation, he and Kako probably play that similar, closer to goal role. I think Kako does have that versatility to be able to come into the midfield. I reckon he's going to do more CBAs
Yeah.
just to be a bit of a wild card in the midfield for Essendon as well. But yeah, where does the same fit around that and not being able to carry too many of those guys that can't run?
Yeah. I think it's also versatility in his position as well. He's that lockdown small forward, but guys like Nick Watson have hops. Huss is the I think equal third smallest player in the competition, so he's already confined to ground level, but he doesn't have those natural hops and athleticism. He's got speed and power, but he is really just restricted to when the footy is in a very small circle around him, and that's you know uh, you can see why he probably did slide down the order a bit in the end, as he was talked about a higher draftee to start the year. Do you think game time's possible for Huss in 2026?
Hmm. I think there would have to be in 2026. There would have to be injuries
Yeah,
for him to get opportunity. I think yeah, it's difficult because you see some training clips and stuff like that with he and Kako and they're linking up and it looks really good. And I think maybe there's a narrative to make there that their friendship and connectivity could create something special for the Bombers. But I think that's another thing to get that working in harmony in an actual AFL game. So I think they'll be hesitant, and I think they'll be more likely to play, like I said, like a Guelphy or somebody like that who plays like a really specific role.
yeah,
He's a little bit more mature. He's got that experience to be able to play it, and he can get a little bit higher. I think that's more likely. But if there was, I mean, like if they had some small forward injuries to some of those guys, I mean, Nick Martin's already out of the team, and I would say that he probably would have played mid slash half forward this
yeah.
season and sort of got up the ground. So there's maybe an in for him there, but I'd say less likely than likely without striking a Sharpie through his name.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think that he does need to improve his fitness just a little bit because it's probably an area that he needs to improve. Now, looking at the five players drafted, do you see a theme across all five?
For the Bombers.
Yeah.
Do I see it? Is this like a trick question or is it
No, it's not. I don't have a theme in my head, but I'm wondering if you do because I'll be linking it to another question in a second too.
okay? I mean the first thing that stands out with that group of players to me is leadership
Yeah.
more than
Okay.
anything else for
I
the
like it.
Bombers.
Yeah.
I think it's and not solely leadership. I mean, there was other players that have good leadership in that crop that play different positions, but leadership that's building from the midfield out, and I think it's trying to correct some wrongs of recruiting mistakes of the past. And it's Rosa definitely trying to stamp his authority on this team with his own style, and that is around competitors, leadership, and definitely that ball use element that you added in there as well, particularly
Yeah.
with Kondogiannis and Farrow for me, who kind of bring that. But yeah, it's bringing. I don't want to say bring an edge because it's like that
The Essendon
Essendon edge,
Edge.
the
Bring it
Essendon
back.
edge. Yeah, but like bringing a physical edge and a competitive edge that
Yeah.
probably hasn't been there with other recruits in the past for me. And I think that's led by Essendon's new dad, Dyson Sharp.
Yeah. Now looking at 2026 a little bit, which I think neither of us really want to do right now because we don't have our head wrapped around the coming draft. But if there's an area that you think the Bombers need to be looking at, like an area on the field that you think the Bombers need to be looking at, what position do you think we're going to be, really focusing on in the 2026 off season?
I feel the first place I go with every team, I'm like, everyone needs an Ollie Dempsey. Every
Yeah.
single team needs an Ollie Dempsey, like an elite winger, but I don't think that would be first on Essendon's profile. I
No.
do think that they need more high forwards.
Okay.
So small
Yep.
forwards that can play that higher. That position is incredibly important in the modern game. Someone that can run like a midfielder, is a little bit smaller and craftier, and has elite ball use. Like think like Brian Myers,
Yep.
Dylan Moore, that type of player. Where you've probably drafted, like I said, like with Kako and Huss, they're a little bit more closer to goal, speed and power guys. You need that speed endurance balance so they can get
Yep.
higher up the ground, win at stoppage, put a lot of pressure on. It's almost the most important position on the field. So I'd be looking for somebody that could play that role for sure.
Yeah.
And then I think adding a bit of quality to the tall stocks as well would
Okay.
be something for me. Like I look at that forward line and I'm like, it's got Caddy, who's a hybrid sort of third tall. He can be a key, like with his athleticism, he can play as a key, but he doesn't have elite physicality, like in the same sense that like a Jesse Hogan does, or he doesn't have the height of a Sam Darcy where he can just take big contested marks all the time. Like he's got to get it on the lead and he's got to get moving to be able to get the ball. So I'd want someone that I can kick to and be just really, really trusting
Yep.
that they're going to be able to compete in the air. And I don't think you necessarily always get that from, say, a Peter Wright,
Yeah, I agree.
who's there at the moment. And I feel Essendon, they have a lot of guys that spit out some decent goal output numbers on the stat sheet, but like it's more of a competitiveness thing in the contest. Like when you want that outlet kick from defense and just getting up the line, not getting intercepted on by the opposition defenders and stuff like that. So I'd be looking at quality tools that are at least 195 centimeters. Like I wouldn't want to get like absolutely hung up on the size and the height of them, but
Yeah.
ones that can compete with those big dogs.
Yeah, I think that you've probably highlighted the two positions that I've probably been focusing on trying to brush up on the 2026 draft. I don't know if that's because, instinctively I'm just kind of thinking about Essendon or maybe it's just the funnest position, but I've been looking at, like the Marlon Neocleus small forward types who are just absolutely electric. Yeah, the Jack Pickett's, the Lewis Hounsomes in the air who are, just marking everything. I don't know if it's because I'm focusing on these players, but it does feel like the 2026 draft could be a decent one in the forward half of the field, which is fun if that's the case, because as you say, that's probably an area of the ground that the Bombers do need fixing. Now, before we go, Dylan, give me your ladder prediction for Essendon in 2026. I don't think I've heard you give it out yet.
I think they've still got a long way to go. I think they're clearly still in a big development phase at the moment. So I think,
Flagged
I mean,
ons?
what's that? Sorry,
Flagged ons?
flagged up. Yeah, exactly. That's where I was going with that.
Yeah, good.
No, I mean, I think there's still some teams in the competition that are worse. Like, it's interesting. Like my Roos, where are they going to finish? I think they need a bump this year, really, really badly. But I'm not convinced that they're going to get it. I think West Coast are bad. I think you'll finish above Carlton.
Okay. All right.
I think
All
that's
right.
a genuine conversation. Like I think they're looking really bad. I think Port Adelaide could get condensed into that bottom area. I think people do forget that Essendon before the injury crisis last year actually were in the top 8, if I'm not mistaken there. So they can put it together and there is some quality. I think they need to be able to make that blend of midfielders work together for this year. I think if they can kind of reinvent Elijah Sardis into that stopper midfielder, turn him into a bit of a Josh Dunkley with his physicality and his size, and not be so concerned on the fact that he can't kick and all of those sorts of things, and just kind of get him to shut bigger bodied mids down from the opposition. You've got Durham, who's a really, really top end player. Does Darcy Parish play a lot of football? He still can be a guy that gets in there and wins first possession for sure.
Yeah.
And I've liked what I've seen from him at training. It's more with him just like, is he going to break down again when you need him the most? There's still some good players and top level players in that Essendon team overall. And the back line is pretty good if everybody is fit. So I'm saying 14th.
Okay. That's probably, I think that might be almost exactly where I have us too. So there you go. I
Yeah, I
like it.
haven't. I mean, I certainly haven't fully done a ladder predictor there. That's very much
Yeah.
off the cuff. I'll say
I like it.
13th or 14th.
Okay.
About where Essendon fit for me.
Yeah, I think it's roughly the same for pretty much every reason you just went through. Dylan, mate, thank you for coming on the channel.
Mate, anytime for you, Felix. You're an absolute legend of the content space.
Right back at you. Let everyone know what you've got going on because you've got some plans for a couple of your channels coming up.
Yeah, I do actually. So, I mean, I'll be continuing to do stuff on my channel, which will be, I suppose, predominantly draft related on my channel. But as I said at the beginning, I always do like to bring it back to AFL content as well. And that's why I do the best 23s and stuff like that, because I think it's important to connect all of that together when you're looking at who clubs are going to draft. We also have on the True Footy channel, we have Footy from the Flat, which is coming back this Saturday from 11 a.m. That show's going to change a little bit. We're going to be doing Monday episodes when the season starts. So it's going to be more of a reviewing the AFL games and talking about all of the narratives and
Okay, I like
such.
it.
So we'll be doing less watch-alongs, but we are going to chuck a few watch-alongs in as well on that show on the True Footy YouTube channel. And I'll be doing some contributing to that channel as well for broader AFL content. So a bit going on across Dylan Alexander and True Footy in 2026.
Nice. I'd love to hear it. And when I'm in Melbourne, we got to get out to a talent league game or an APS game or something like that because I'll be out there a little bit this year. So
100%,
we
mate.
should definitely do that.
Have you booked any flights this year?
I'm actually going on Tuesday for. I'm not even staying a night, so I'm flying in the morning.
Oh,
I'm going to the club, and then I'm flying out in late in the afternoon. So that's my next flight booked out.
all
But
right.
I'll be I think I'll be early. I might try and get the talent league. They do a double header or a triple header on the or a double header on the first. I'll try and get out to
Should
that.
be a double. Should be a double, I reckon.
Yeah, I'll try and get out to that one and plenty more throughout the year. And this won't be the last video we do together, Dylan.
Definitely not, mate. Definitely not.
We will be in touch. Thank you for coming on. Thank you everybody for watching. Make sure you like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new. Go check out Dylan's videos in the description below. And as always, go Bombers. All
Don't,
right, mate.
don't know why I did that.